ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Okay, Alhamdulillah, we're going through proofs for the existence of God. Even though the Quran strongly insists that can there be any doubt about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we live in an age in which the fitrah of a human being has been and can be corrupted, so corrupted by so many things that atheism can actually become a creed, a belief. And some of the findings of science, or rather the interpretation of some of the findings of science, are so naturalistic and materialistic that further endorses the belief in many people, or at least the attitude, if not the belief, then the attitude in many people that really the material world, the material universe is all that there is. There is no realm of supernatural occurrences. It's all here. It's all in the here and now in the material world. And so that is the reason for some people in our age, and for the last few hundred years, in the story of human beings in the West, why people have turned their backs on any type of religion or faith or belief in God, and have adopted atheism as a creed. That's some people. There are other people who will freely admit that the reason why I have an atheistic attitude, they'll say, is simply because I cannot tolerate the idea of some higher authority, particularly a divine authority, having a say in what I can or cannot do, what is morally right for me or morally wrong for me. And there are people who, it's not that they are convinced by some kind of scientific proofs or atheistic arguments that God doesn't exist, but rather their hawa, their whims and desires want for the fact that God doesn't exist. And in the absence of God, everything is halal, right? Everything is lawful. And there are some, like the famous Western author Aldous Huxley, back in the mid-20th century. He wrote a number of novels, dystopian novels about how the future would be. Probably the most famous of them is Brave New World. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, along with 1984 by George Orwell, are the two probably most famous books of the middle of the 20th century, which really depict what the future is going to be like. George Orwell's 1984 tells us of a big brother and a surveillance state system spying on and looking down upon everything you say and do, and even thoughts they become crimes. If you don't think in the right way, then it becomes a crime against the state, punishment by torture or execution. And likewise, even the vocabulary, the language, is controlled by the state, so that whoever controls language controls ideas. And George Orwell called that in his book Newspeak. And there was a special department of the government that actually would regularly bring in change definitions of words and erase other words from the dictionary, so that they can further control how the ideas of people, because ideas have to be expressed in language, and if you can control the meaning of words, you have a way of some way of controlling thoughts. SubhanAllah. A contrast to that, Aldous Huxley, who said, my point of mentioning him is that he said, I hope that there isn't a God. And really, me and my friends, we live life as hoping that there isn't a God, and as if there isn't a God. Why? Because if there is, half the things that we do would be immoral, would not be right. So there are people who just want to be atheists from hawa, from desires. It's interesting though, Aldous Huxley's book, Brave New World, wasn't like Orwell's, whereby it's like a surveillance state with Big Brother, dictating to you what you can say and do and even think. Huxley's vision of a dystopian future, not utopian, but dystopian, where things are really bad, was the opposite. There you would take a pill called Soma, right? It's a future whereby people have everything, and entertainment and distractions are the thing, and every day you take this pill as part of the cultural ethic, and this pill makes you feel high and happy, and there's free love, and there's I can't remember if it's young people. The society is only full of young people, and that type of future was dystopian. Why? Because it distracts you from the greater things in life through trivial distractions of entertainment and so on, and drugs and so on and so forth, and free sex. And actually, in the West, throughout the Cold War, there was always a fear that we would have a totalitarian state. Western Europe was always fearful of becoming a totalitarian state, like fascist Italy or communist Russia, for example, whereby liberties would be eroded. And so even at school, when we were 13, 14 in my generation, in the late 70s, 80s, we read in English literature George Orwell's 1984, Animal Farm, sorry. And if you could, then read 1984, to kind of imprint on us the ideas of avoiding in order that for us to be liberal, capitalistic, democratic, as opposed to totalitarian, socialist, communists. Yet, however, that didn't come to pass in the West, and now in much of the world, it's not like that. But from an Islamic point of view, the thing that has really taken human beings away from God is not a totalitarian fascist state, but it's actually the type of future Aldous Huxley proposed, which was people will be distracted from the higher realities of life through distractions. In this case, those liberal distractions like films, entertainment, music, relationships, everything is halal. And so actually we, and under that guise, the government are saying, give us as much control as possible so that we can give you as much liberty as possible, as much freedom as possible. And we've all brought into that idea, and more Muslim countries are buying into that idea. That idea, though it's not, it's not like, a socialist, communist state or country, actually destroys the human being in a deeper way, from the angle of just making dunya, dunya, dunya the goal, and pleasure seeking, following one's hawa and one's nafs, one's ego and one's whims and desires to be the overall object, overall object and goal. And actually, in the end, the final arbiter, the final judgment in what is and isn't good or bad. So actually, we need to take Aldous Huxley's Brave New World dystopia more seriously than we now need to take George Orwell's 1984. Anyway, bit of a ramble there. So let's get back to this idea of proofs for the existence of God. Can Dr. Salim tell me where we ended last week? Is it on 12 and 13?
Yes.
Did we do 13?
Yeah, I think we just went down up to 13.
Brilliant. Okay, excellent.
So
just let me recap there. Let me just go back up. So all it was Kalam is saying that they have this belief in atomism, that in the end there is the smallest unit of material existence that they call the Johar, the atom, and which we in modern science may consider to be quarks, or perhaps if it is proven in the future, strings, as per string theory. But we're talking about the smallest unit of material existence. And they said that, look, the whole universe, it has to be made up of these smallest units of matter. But these smallest units of matter themselves are created by God and don't have any autonomous, independent existence except through God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every second, every millisecond, is keeping those things in existence. I mean, of course, there are some things he takes out of existence, but though everything existence that we see is only there because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is constantly creating, recreating, giving life, giving life, so on and so forth, every second of every hour of every day. Allahu Akbar. Even time itself, which is an act of creation, has the smallest unit. Okay, even time has the smallest unit, and Allah creates these units of time. And I said that is remarkably, it is so uncanny and so similar to modern quantum physics, which talks about the smallest unit of time called the Planck time, 10 to the minus 43 seconds, which is an incredibly small amount of time, which human beings, we can't perceive. It's so small. And yet it seems, so mark my words carefully, it seems that quantum physics seems to suggest that actually beyond 10 to the smaller than 10 to the minus 43 seconds is meaningless, and that it seems to suggest that these units of time, they are discrete, independent units of time, and the only reason they flow, so this is my addition, the only reason they flow, it seems, is because just like frames in an old movie, before we had downloads, okay, then you had frames, single frames, single pictures on a roll of movie, and if you put that through a projector fast enough, it seems like the whole thing is moving. In fact, when we were kids, we were taught to take a blank pieces of paper, okay, like for example a blank book, and if you just draw on it a stick man, a round head, and sticks for legs, sticks for arms, and then the next page you draw exactly the same in exactly the same place, but you move the arm a little bit more. Okay, you draw the arm slightly raised, and on the next page slightly raised even more, the next page slightly raised that way, and then you flick through the book, then you get this image that flickers and it moves. Possibly time is like that. Human time and human life is like that, given the fact that Allah creates, recreates, creates. This is according to Kalam theology, that Allah, nothing has eternal existence. and nothing can endure. Nothing has the quality of baqa except Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. And things only seem to have the quality of enduring because Allah is creating, recreating, recreating. So really, that's really where we kind of got to. So let's now move on to the actual kalam, cosmological argument, and how the mutakallimun proved the existence of God just by way of rational proofs. So point 14, Bismillah. So how does all of this tie in with the kalam, with the cosmological argument, or with the kalam cosmological argument for God's existence? Well, the preamble, the muqaddama, the preface to the kalam argument may be presented as follows. So this isn't the kalam argument. This is like a muqaddama, some steps before it. So 3 points. 1, an actual infinite number doesn't exist. And they prove that rationally, and they prove that textually, as we discussed last week. Infinity doesn't exist. Infinity in the past doesn't exist. There's a discussion about can infinity exist in the future, but we will leave that. And an actual infinite number doesn't exist. Therefore, the series of causes, meaning in the past, for the cosmos or the universe to be as it is now cannot be infinite in sequence. That is, it must be finite. Therefore, point 3, the cosmos was brought into existence at some point in the past, at some finite point in the past. Since there cannot be infinity in the past, the universe must have come into existence. This is quite a simple, rational argument. Once the tricky bit of infinity, why there can't be infinity, is understood, then this muqaddamah is simple. Actual infinity doesn't exist. Therefore, the series of causes that brought the universe into being cannot be infinite, must be finite, and therefore at some finite point in the past, the universe came into existence. Point 15, the final conclusion in the above argument, that the universe came into existence at some point in the past, not only follows logically from the initial 2 premises, it also finds support in science. Cosmologists, or sometimes they're called astrophysicists, I think cosmologists is the term now. When I was doing my degree in astrophysics in the mid-80s, and prior to that, it was called astrophysics. Cosmologists are now certain that the universe actually did have a beginning. Okay, scientists are actually now certain that the universe actually did have a beginning, the Big Bang. But to be clear, the logical conclusion in the above argument is still valid and true, regardless of scientific proofs or empirical proofs for the Big Bang. Empirical proofs means just proofs that you know through seeing, observation, measuring, which generally is the scientific method. Empirical is something that you can kind of measure, and the senses, touch, hear, sight, taste, can kind of engage with. Okay. So regardless of whether science science really believed in the Big Bang conclusively after the 1960s, even Einstein in the 50s was suspicious about this idea. He followed the thousands of year old view that the universe has always been and always is, and it doesn't grow or it doesn't shrink, it's just there. But there was conclusive empirical evidences from the 30s onwards, 1930s onwards, and by the mid 1960s, or Wilson and Penrose in the United States, two radio astronomers, they picked up what is called the background microwave radiation of the universe. If there's an explosion in the universe, then there must be some heat. If there's an explosion in this world, then around the point of explosion, there's a lot of heat. And as you go further and further away, the heat gets less and less, or the more that time goes on, the heat dissipates and spreads out until it becomes all at an even temperature. So they concluded that must have happened also in the Big Bang, and there must be millions of years later that the heat has spread out all over the universe like a, like a room. If you turn on the heater in a room and all the doors are closed to that room, it gets very hot. But if you open up the doors, and let's say the door of the sitting room leads onto the door of the kitchen, and the door of the kitchen leads onto the door of the bedroom, let's just say, then slowly and steadily that heat will leave the sitting room and will go into the bedroom and the kitchen. And so instead of the sitting room being like 27 degrees centigrade Celsius, the heat moves out into all the rooms and reaches an equilibrium, a balanced temperature, which is, let's say 18 degrees. So the whole house is a nice, balanced, even 18 degrees. They said something like that must have happened in the universe. And they calculated that that even temperature must be a few degrees above absolute zero. And in the mid-60s, Penrose and Wilson actually discovered that temperature, discovered that wherever you take the temperature of the universe, it has exactly the temperature a few degrees above absolute zero that the mathematics and the science predicted, along with the fact that galaxies are moving away from each other. I mean, some clusters of galaxy might stick together in their local area, but on the whole, everything is moving away from each other. So that must have been the result of a bang. And this leftover hotness, temperature, they were kind of solid proofs for the idea of the Big Bang. The Hubble telescope over the last 8-9 years has taken incredibly more accurate readings of the overall temperature of the universe, and it agrees so well with the mathematics, to such a high degree. Anyway, so regardless of those scientific proofs, logically, the universe must have come into existence at some finite time in the past is a logical argument, which is very valid. So even if there were no proofs, we'd still believe that the universe came into existence, not only through text of revelation, but logically speaking. So point 16, from here, it's a short step to teasing out the kalam cosmological argument, the dalil al-huduth. Okay, just one point here. Some of the stuff that I'm saying now, okay, if you've never heard things like this before, not a problem. It's not required for you to understand everything all in one go. Some of these ideas take time to understand. It also helps if we read broadly. Some of these ideas are now very well known in popular culture. Okay, so for most of the UK, it's absolutely true for, it's probably true for nearly every country. Most of the UK, the people in the UK don't read a lot, and if they do read, they read trivial stuff, novels and books and comics and whatever. But there's not serious reading, and yet most people in the UK, as is the case in America, will know of the Big Bang less through scientific learning and scientific reading and scientific education, and more from because they watch Star Trek or they watch science fiction programs, or it just gets mentioned in this TV show or that movie and so on and so forth through popular culture. But it's important for us Muslims to begin to understand. We need to be scientifically literate, and we need to especially ulama need to be scientifically literate, and not scientifically literate as in like the science of 100 years ago, or the science of 60 years ago, 50 years ago. This is one reason, perhaps not it's not the only reason, but it's one reason why young people are further growing they further lose trust in the ulama, because the ulama don't seem to know even the basics of how the modern world works. And some ulama, stuff, they blag their way through discussions like that, and they shouldn't do that. They should actually take the time out to see what is, in terms of priority, in terms of what is the thing that is an obstacle to many people or most people's iman in this day and age. And whatever those priorities are, to give those priorities the due, the haqq that they deserve in terms of learning, reading, and teaching. So here is the Dalil al-Huduth, or the Kalam cosmological argument, for 4 points. 1, so everything that begins to exist must have a cause for its existence. 2, the universe began to exist. 3, therefore, the universe must have a cause for its existence. Okay, that's the Kalam argument. Now, there is a 4th point, which is implied in that the cause for the existence of the universe must be an uncreated God who has certain qualities, for example, qualities of being very different than the material universe. So God is not subject to the same forces or the same influences as the material universe. God must be uncaused, meaning being there forever. God must be all-powerful in order to bring such a complex thing into existence. God must be intelligent, super intelligent, to bring something like so complex into existence. God must be wise, because we see wisdom in so many things throughout the universe. And so those kind of basic qualities that monotheists of any persuasion, of the Jewish, the Christian, or the Islamic persuasion, although only the Muslims are mu'mins, have iman, truly are believers. The rest are kafirs, even though they are ahlul kitab kafirs or kitabi kafirs. Those qualities that the monotheists believe that God must have, you can just see that you can just rationally deduce that just from these 3 and 4 points. Everything that begins to exist must have a cause for its existence. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe must have a cause for its existence. And we believe that cause must be an uncaused God, or God who is the God of Scripture, of revelation. Okay, so that really is the Kalam cosmological argument, and it satisfied Muslim theologians for over 1,000 years. It satisfied Christian theologians, especially Catholic theologians, for almost the same amount of time. However, in modern times, certain arguments have been raised against this classical Kalam cosmological argument. And these arguments are such that many people have come to believe them. Many scientists have come to believe them. However, if we're to be perfectly honest, many scientists, even though they claim we don't blindly follow, we follow evidence, we don't blindly follow, actually have just blindly followed other scientists who have made tremendous blunders. Let's have a look in section 4.17. So I wrote, the above argument, as rational as it is, has been critiqued on a few grounds. Okay. So these are some of the main criticisms. One objection states that the argument's premise number 1, that everything that begins to exist must have a cause for its existence, that premise, although intuitively obvious, seems to be false, they say. Some scientists and atheists in our time said, even though it's intuitively obvious, but actually science has shown it now to be false. They say, for quantum physics appears to show that electrons, these subatomic particles, can, as well as other subatomic particles, can pass out of existence at one place and reappear elsewhere. Boom, just like that. Okay, they can just vanish like that in one place and appear like that in another place. And this, as the physicist Paul Davies has argued, violates premise number one of the Kalam cosmological argument. And if premise number one is wrong, then the entire argument collapses. If premise number one is wrong, then the argument collapses completely. Okay, so Paul Davies and Lawrence Krauss, the mathematician stroke atheist Lawrence Krauss, and others like him have it seems almost boasted that, you know, their science and today's atheism has finally done away with this thorn in the side of atheism, this Kalam cosmological argument. It's as if they're saying, we've just smashed your premise number one. Without premise number one, you have no foundation. Without the first premise, the second and the third premise, are just invalid. Well, one reply to this thing about things can just come in and out of subatomic particles can come in and out of existence. And look, we've proved it in the laboratory. We proved it in the laboratory. The mathematics is all good. The maths is all good. It happens all the time in the universe, and we can now replicate that in the lab. So, you know, there's no denying it. Well, one reply to this states that although electrons do just that, they do exactly that. One minute they're there, 1 minute they're not there, and they're somewhere else. And 1 minute this particle's gone, and another minute some other particle can pop up. Just, it seems like out of nothing. So although electrons do just that, they can only do so because of what is called a quantum vacuum. So Lawrence Krauss, the title of his book was A Universe from Nothing. And he said, because you can get quantum particles appearing out of nothing, such as electrons, then the universe is a quantum event. It too appeared out of nothing. Okay. If quantum particles, which are each quantum particle coming into existence, popping into existence, is called a quantum event, then the universe can be called a quantum event. And in one sense, it was a quantum event. And if electrons can do it out of nothing, then the universe as a whole can do it out of nothing. And his whole book was argued on that. The problem with that is they also agree that these particles actually reside in what is called a quantum vacuum. These subatomic particles, they're part of what is called a quantum vacuum. Now, a vacuum in quantum physics isn't nothing at all. You know, normally when we use the word vacuum in ordinary speech, we, you know, other than it's another word for, it's mutaradi, for synonymous for a hoover, a vacuum cleaner, a hoover in English, in British English. But no, a vacuum can mean in normal science a place which has nothing in it, no air, no nothing. But in quantum physics, a vacuum isn't nothing at all. Rather, a vacuum is a state of minimal energy, which is seething, which is filled to the brim with virtual particles. It is this vacuum which gives rise to electron fluctuations, say the laws of quantum physics, which is to say, the vacuum's existence is the cause for electrons to exist and to disappear and reappear. Therefore, premise 1 still holds true. So it's not the case. It is absolutely wrong to say that quantum particles come in and out of existence from nothing. That is a lie, even by the standards of quantum physics. And Lawrence Krauss, the cheeky fellow, lied, barefaced lied in his book numerous times. And in interviews, when he's pulled up on this, he even agrees that actually, yes, quantum particles are only there because of a quantum vacuum. He'll even say that, and yet he'll still try to defend the thesis of his book that you got a universe from nothing. But it's not that all atheists lie, but there is a lot of lies going on. Let's put it that way. A lot of lies and ignorance as well. So premise 1, science has not proven at all, has not falsified premise number 1, that everything that begins to exist, meaning it comes into existence after not having existed, must have a cause for its existence. We have nothing to tell us otherwise. And everything in our experience and in our science tells us there must be causes. So that's one argument, and its refutation, or its rad. Point 18. If everything has a cause, runs another objection. This is an old objection. If everything has a cause, runs another objection, then what caused God? If God created everything, who created God? If everything has a cause, what caused God? Right? And normally, when atheists make this argument, that you normally see they have a grin on their face. If everything has a cause, then who caused God? Wah. It's like kind of listened to some Qawwali and got high, right? But that's, if we're leaving emotion out and just doing it with just proofs, rationale, logic, then that is so stupid. Okay, so to this age-old demur, to this age-old objection, Muslim theologians have repeatedly stressed that Allah, that God is musabbibul asbab, the uncaused causer of all things. Okay, conventional notions of time and space don't apply to God. Why? Because as the Quran says, laysa kamithlihi shay, there is nothing like unto him. And as the Tahawiyya, Aqidah Tahawiyya says, he is pre-existent without beginning and eternal without end. That's really orthodoxy's voice. Allah has no cause. He necessarily exists. He is wajibul wujud. And though Allah is the author, the creator of time and space, he is distinct and beyond both. Again, to quote the formulation of Islamic orthodoxy, the Aqidah Tahawiyya again, the 6 directions do not contain him as they do created things. Hence, since the universe is contingent, meaning it is created and brought into existence, and contingent things are not capable of creating themselves or generating themselves, theologians have inferred logically that they are dependent upon an agent who belongs to another order of being, min ghayri jinsiha. Okay, and I'll give an example of that in a minute, namely a deity who is eternal. One of the ways that I like to explain this, and one of the ways I found that it could be explained, is, have any of you seen, hopefully most, if not all of you have seen, people who like to break the world record for domino toppling. And what they do is they spend days and days of setting up these dominoes on the floor, tens of thousands of them, in such a way that, obviously domino toppling is that if you push one, it hits the other, and then it hits the next one, then it hits the next one, and they all topple. Just before we move on, has anyone seen like a video of domino toppling? Yeah, do you know what I mean by setting up little dominoes and then just toppling one of, and you push one and the rest of them all fall, and sometimes there are thousands and it takes minutes and minutes for all of them to kind of fall, and it forms beautiful patterns and whatever. Are we kind of okay on this idea? Yes, no, anybody?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, then imagine the dominoes like that, and there's hundreds of thousands of them, tens of thousands of them, let's just say. What you need, though, to start the whole process is you need something to push the first domino. Wind, your finger, something to push the first domino. And that something has to be outside of the system. Hence, normally it's a finger or a push from something outside of the system, outside of the domino system. And once the first domino is pushed and it falls onto the next domino, which falls onto the next domino, and so on and so forth, until finally all the dominoes have just toppled or laid down. Then the idea of something outside of the system pushing the domino is the same idea. You need something min ghayri jinsiha, outside of the system, another order of being, to start the whole process of the universe. And that thing, that being that starts the whole process, cannot be part of the universe, cannot be part of time and space, or subjected to the same rules of time and space. And that is Allah. Okay, what are we discussing here? Well, if everything has a cause, what caused Allah? Moreover, the Kalam cosmological argument states, and here is, leave all of that Aqidah, just this last bit. What does the Kalam cosmological argument state? Everything that begins to exist must have a cause. Everything that begins to exist, or to put it in a even more daqiq way, everything that begins to exist after not having existed. Okay, everything that begins to exist after not existing must have a cause. That's what the Kalam argument says. Allah, however, is beginningless. Allah didn't come into existence after not having existed. Allah has always existed. There is no such thing as Allah's non-existence. Hayat, the quality of life and living, is just intrinsic to the being of God. Allah cannot be except living eternally. And so Allah has no cause. Only those things need cause which were brought into existence after not existing. Okay. And this one simple point in theology, which is the same for Jews and Christians, is really lost on so many atheists today. One of my favorite popular philosophers, he writes popular philosophy books, Julian Beginning, the English philosopher Julian Beginning. Or even if you take Bertrand Russell, from the great philosophers of the 20th century, just so many of them you couldn't name. It's like kind of the big philosophers of Western philosophy, have almost nearly all of them make the same mistake. They say, well, look, you know what, we don't need to spend too much time in refuting this kalam cosmological argument and all of these Christian, Muslim theology. We just have to tell them, if everything needs a cause for existence, who caused God? If everything needs a creator, then who created God? Khalas, end of. But they fail to understand that point of rationality, that it's not. One doesn't say that everything needs a cause. Everything that begins to exist after not existing needs a cause. And Allah simply hasn't been brought into existence. Na'udhu billah min dhalik. And that is typical. This is not an exaggeration. That is typical of the level of theological understanding of many of these atheists and many of these atheistic philosophers. They are, without any exaggeration, without doing any dhulm to them, they are infantile. They are childlike in their understanding of theology. And you'd think, okay, in the beginning, they don't know much. But you know what? Every time you encounter a Christian theologian or a Muslim theologian or a Jewish theologian, maybe not Muslim, you'd learn their arguments a bit. So after 5-10 years, you'd expect Dawkins and Lawrence Krauss and people like that, or even Julian Beginning, for example, to actually update their views. But no, the same fallacy, the same lie, in fact, is perpetrated again and again and again in pages upon pages of their books. Not old books, new books as well. And so you know that there is no truth seeking there. That's not the case. That can't be. They can't be truth seekers. And Allah knows best. I'm not making a hukum on hukum of the akhirah on any of them. I'm just making a hukum in this dunya that they haven't said la ilaha illallah. They don't want to say la ilaha illallah, but they haven't said la ilaha illallah. So they're kafirs in this world. Then we're satisfied with what Allah will do, hukum shakhsiya or hukum mu'ayyan in the hereafter. But hukum am, Muslims go to Jannah, Kafirs go to Jahannam. That's hukum am, the general ruling. Specific ruling on specific individuals, many of them will have no excuse. A few non-Muslims will have an excuse on the Day of Judgment. But we leave that up to the justice and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we follow the general rule that Allah teaches us. Muslims go to Jannah, Kafirs go to Jahannam, as a general ruling, hukum am. As a specific ruling, hukum mu'ayyin. Those who die as Kafirs, we bury them as Kafirs. And we don't say about them specifically that specific person, Bill Smith, is in Jahannam. We say that actually the general rule is Kafirs are in Jahannam. Now, will Bill Smith be given an excuse or not on the Day of Judgment? Did he search for the truth, but there were genuine obstacles in his way? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell that. A few people will have excuses. It's difficult to imagine many people in this day and age having excuses when they are not truth seekers. And the Maturidi position of the two positions in Sunni theology is really the one that seems to me that chimes with all of the proofs. It kind of harmonizes all of the texts. More than the Ash'ari position on this. The Ash'ari position is, if they haven't received a messenger, then they have an excuse on the Day of Judgment. they haven't heard the message, then they have an excuse. But the Maturidis say, no, it's not quite that. They have to be truth seekers in the first place. I mean, the Maturidis don't use this word. They have to be truth seekers. Okay, so if inside they're not searching for the truth, then it doesn't matter whether they had a message or not. They're not truth seekers, and therefore they have no excuse. But if they are truth seekers, then, and they didn't hear the message, but they were sincerely inwardly truth seekers, then inshallah ta'ala they can have an excuse. They have an excuse. That is a discussion we can take up some other time, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, point 19. Let's see if we can do point 19. Oh, this looks long. No, if you don't mind, Dr. Salim, shall we leave it there?
We can do next week, and then maybe shall we just take some questions if people are raising some hands, inshallah.
Yeah, so let's do point 19 onwards next week, but let's take questions today.
Jazakallah.
Yeah. You're going to have to read them out to me. It's just too small on my screen.
Yeah. So,
way too small.
I don't think there's any written question. There are two people raising their hands, so hopefully.
Okay, so
Brother Malahat has raised his hand, so he could ask his question, and then Brother Iqbal.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
So my question was actually a while back ago. I asked about the point number 16. It's a comment and question that, so in our days and time, the atheism is the largest going religion itself. So how we can address that, and what are the keys or toolkit for our young generation to give them some sort of like a toolkit or some tools so they can adapt and stay away from that fitna? That's the number one. Second, for that, you mentioned earlier about the theology of the popular culture. So I think that's another dilemma of our time, that we have like this whole Disneyland methodology and mentality, and we happily buy ourselves for those DVDs and movies and books for our daughters, where the prince is always be right. You know, the prince is always against their uncle, their parents, and then she become like successful in their life. So every Disney movie you see, Cinderella type, they end up into the same mindset. So they are actually pondering their messages to our youth big time. So how we can able to, get this some sort of toolkit and arguments to our young generation, so they can adapt in their high school, their college life, when they're not with us.
Even though they're related, they are actually two separate questions. The first challenge, okay, goes straight to the heart of Iman itself. And if bi'idhnillah we don't get this right for ourselves or our children, they could lose their Iman. The Disneyland or the Disney movies, you know, where the main character, he or she, is always nicely going against their dad, their parents, society, and whatever, and there is that very subtle indoctrination vis-a-vis Disney movies and Disney stories. That normally doesn't impact upon our belief in God, but it tends to impact upon our morality, our adab and our akhlaq, and and our relationship, for example, obviously with parents and with the opposite gender and so on and so forth. So that there is that impacts on our morality, whereas the first type impacts upon our beliefs. So the first one is about shubahat, doubts in belief, which is a really serious thing, and the other one is about shahawat, whims and desires and following our passions and whatever. The first The Quran will tell us the first type of disease, the disease of shubahat, can only be, bi'idhnillah, remedied by yaqeen, certainty, conviction in one's belief in Allah. And the other one, the disease of shahawat, desires and false desires, can be remedied by sabr, by having these restraints and boundaries that we follow, that Allah teaches us to have these type of boundaries and these type of understandings about what is right and wrong, moral and immoral. As regards to the toolkit, then my brother, this is exactly what we're trying to do here at some small level. When we equip individuals like yourselves with understanding the basic arguments of atheism and understanding the basic arguments of Muslim theology, then we can take these things and we can be a barakah to others wherever we are. So I may go, for example, let's say at the end of this, people get it, understand it, they've, and they've read their own readings around it, and mashallah, they can, then the next stage is, how can I explain it? I mean, please don't try to explain it like the way I've written it. Writing something and speak and explaining something are two different things. Normally, one doesn't use this type of language in ordinary speech. One uses this type of language in writing. It's formal. But normally when we're talking to young people or even just other Muslim adults, we don't use formal speech, unless of course we're doing a khutbah or something, or a dars. We use casual speech, simplify things. So one has to think about how best to simplify them. Then there is also that challenge that some of you might have to simplify it, not just in English, but also maybe in Urdu, for example. So again, words matter and how we explain things matter. But we can be a barakah, my brother, by the fact that once I understand these things, if a doubt arises with any Muslim, I can say, inshallah ta'ala, let's discuss this bit by bit, slowly and steadily. Let me help you, brother. And if it's a young person, young Muslim girl, young Muslim boy, Muslim youth, and they have these things, they're confused now that they've done science or they've done philosophy in college or uni or whatever, we can say, well, let's hang on a bit. Let's go through this a bit. You might find, young man, young woman, you might find that actually you haven't thought things through properly. I'm suggesting that maybe you haven't, but hey, if you feel that the truth is with you, you should have no problem discussing with me. So otherwise there is no toolkit in the sense of, you just press an app and then it's all done, okay? And you just press a button on your phone and hey presto. No, the best that we can do is that from a young age, we try to teach our children the basic falaki arguments of the Quran, the kind of cosmological arguments of the Quran that, look, how did all of this get here? And kind of slowly introduce them to that, not through formal logic or not through al-kalam, but just through what the Quran is telling us to look, unzur, look, reflect. This couldn't have just come here from nothing. So how? And once children have a very powerful, they have, children, we don't give them credit. The Quran, I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but the Quran, when it speaks about the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, when Ibrahim alayhi salam is a young boy, okay, he's able to understand why kind of idols can't do things themselves and whatever. And he's, he does certain things for his community to make them understand, and they're grown-up adults. Because actually sometimes young people have a deep fitri, they have a deep innate nature of haqq, which gets rusted over. So the toolkit is, let us understand and let's impart that understanding to others. As regards to the Disney problem, that's always going to be a problem. I'm not downplaying it, but that's not what we're discussing here, and that's not what we're tackling here. What we're tackling is people leaving their Islam, not people are Muslims but are doing haram. Alhamdulillah, they're still Muslims, right? So be clear on that. Okay, girls who, and it doesn't have to be girls, boys. And here's another thing, it's Asian mentality, Indian, Pakistani, Bengali, and it's not just Asian, it's Arab mentality as well. Why just boys? Why just girls? Boys as well. What my Muslim, the Muslim girls, the Muslim daughters should have haya, sharam, and modesty. No, Muslim boys should have as well. Muslim girls shouldn't be going out all times of night. Well, neither should Muslim boys. Okay, if we're going to make that dichotomy in the 21st century, don't expect our daughters to think Islam is unfair. Expect our daughters to think Islam is the cause of injustice. If we're going to, make those kind of divisions. But alhamdulillah, we're not talking about that at the moment. We're talking about the toolkit of yaqeen, and this is part of it, my brother. This is part of it, and Allah knows best. Now, next question.
Right, if you have a question.
Hello, assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah, Sheikh. So I have a little clarification here. In an Islamic tradition, did we shift this kalam cosmological argument from everything exists has a cause to everything that begin to exist has a cause? One question. The second one that you mentioned about all these people that refuted these easily is that they don't listen to the argument sometimes, and they just take the benefit of doubt, because most of the time I see that people quoting is everything that exists has a cause, and that's actually a flawed. So that's second thing. And third one is how, in a summarize in a very concise way, we can say about the Lawrence Cross, position in 2 sentences that no, he is wrong. I mean, he's taking that premises as wrong. Jazakallah khair.
Barakallah feekum. Let me start with the last one, my brother. Lawrence Krauss. How is he wrong in 2 sentences? He says subatomic particles can come into existence from nothing. But the truth is, subatomic particles or quantum particles can only come into existence from something, and that something is called a quantum vacuum. And he himself, in various places in his book, mentions the thing about quantum vacuum, and that is where these quantum particles come from. And yet he still insists that actually they come from nothing, even after he's contradicted himself a number of times in his book. So that's that in Lawrence Krauss. The first one, just remind me of the first thing again.
So in our Islamic tradition, did we had a shift by saying,
oh, right, okay.
Maybe understand?
No, we didn't have, no, Barakallah feekum, excellent question. We didn't have a shift. It was always whatever comes into existence. And sometimes whatever comes into existence, meaning before it existed, it didn't exist. So sometimes they say it fully, whatever comes into existence after non-existence needs a cause. And sometimes they say it in a brief way, whatever comes into existence needs a cause. But in both cases, the long sentence or the short sentence, the implication is the same. Whatever comes into existence needs a cause, meaning that thing didn't exist before it came into existence. So there is no shift. It's the phrase, whatever comes into existence needs a cause, already implies within it whatever comes into existence after not existing. We don't need that extra word. It's superfluous. It's al-kalam. Once you understand, once you actually look, and the Quran has this usloob, has this style as well of speaking. Sometimes the Quran will make statements like that, and you think, you think that, oh, okay, but then you can tease out of the Quran so much of, so much you can unpack the Quran in words like this, mashallah. So briefly, no quantum shift or no shift at all. We've always stated the same thing in our theology. Is that clear, brother?
Yes, but from the atheistic point of view, if you just leave this statement, then it kind of leaves the room.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're right. Absolutely. And so then there's no harm. There's no harm to, or there may be greater wisdom in saying whatever comes into existence after not existing, and then you make the sentence that you have made the sentence watertight. And alhamdulillah, you've helped the other person understand your point, because maybe the other person, as intelligent as they think they are, maybe they're not that intelligent.
Exactly.
And you had a third question. So the first one was this one. Did we have a shift? The third one was Kraus, and the second one was?
Yeah, well, I mean, you already answered that. The third
Okay.
one was that if we don't put our premises right, like
Right.
then the other they can easily capital on that.
Indeed. So you are perfectly right on that question. Absolutely right. Barakallah fikum.
Jazakallah. Just last question from Brother Ibad. He said, how can I find out the reason of my existence, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created me? I did not have any control over my being and death. It was never my wish or desire. So how can I determine why I was created?
It's the for us, we believe it's the very reason why Allah sent prophets and revelation, just to tell us and remind us and tell us what is the purpose of our existence. That's point one. Point two, in the absence of revelation, leave revelation. When we just think a little bit, we kind of know that however else we describe it, there is something different about us human beings compared to monkeys and dogs and dolphins and chimpanzees and cats and dogs and whatever. There's something different. We seem to be able to think better. We seem to be having something in us that makes us adventurous and explore. There's something in us that makes us want to control our environment and change our environment and not be enslaved by our environment. So we have certain qualities. When we think about these things, and when we reflect upon just human life and a little bit of human history, we realize that there's something, we seem to have the ability to do more than just eat and drink and procreate like other animals. And that there have been many good voices in society who tell us that there is a good way of living life, that life should be lived in a good way. So, for example, Socrates or Plato, one of the two said, the student or the teacher said, the unexamined life is not worth living. Okay, thousands of years ago, 400 or 500 years before Christ, alayhi salam, Socrates or Plato said the unexamined life wasn't worth living. There was an understanding that one should use their aql to live good. What is good? That's a different question, but at least use your aql. At least try to think reasonably and rationally of what could possibly be good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us revelation to make it very clear what is the good and how is the good to be obtained. So, that's the brief answer. Then this detailed answer would be, it depends upon what person you're talking to and what level of doubt they have. If it's a person who's saying, look, why can't I just live the liberal consumer life? Then we would respond with more detail to what I have just said. If it's a case of, well, as a Muslim, what is my purpose of living? Then we can just make it simple by saying, look, Allah says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Allah didn't create the jinn nor mankind except that we may worship him. And if it's something else, then it might be something in between the two answers I've already given. So sometimes we need to answer according to the psychology and the background of the one answering the question. And not because we want to sound clever, but because we want to help them find meaning and truth in their life. this idea, this isn't for me and you to show, mashallah, how much we've read. This is to just help others as we would like to be helped if we were in the same situation of someone giving us a hand to discover meaning in my life and to discover truth. Because without meaning, well, the West is now a society that has more or less close to 100 years lived without meaning. It is when human beings have no meaning, we are now only beginning to find out the psychological destruction that happens when human beings are led to believe that life is meaningless. It's here by chance. There is nothing after life. There is no higher purpose to life. When human beings don't have that inward anchor, the psychological terrors that are unleashed inside the human creature, modern science and modern medicine is only beginning to discover this. Ask Allah for safety.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah. Inshallah, we're just on time. And I will dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, our Shaykh, and also everyone who's been spent here.
Ameen.
Patience, and also the whole humanity, especially in the time of need when they all need our duas, special duas for all the brothers and sisters in India and in Pakistan and Bangladesh, all the world, inshallah, where people are just being afflicted with coronavirus and new waves coming up, as you could all perhaps see and read. But anyway, I make dua for them, and you all should continue to make.
Ameen. Ameen. And let's not forget, the Prophet ﷺ said about the Quraysh, about the Mushrik Quraysh, who were already battling him and making war against him. But in the end, he still made that dua, Allahumma ighfir li qawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. Oh Allah, forgive my people, for they know not.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We resume.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.